morning. I'm Bill Bostick. I'm the presiding circuit judge in Shelby County, and I'm also a proud graduate of the class of Leadership Shelby County 2008, and I appreciate you joining us this morning. I know what you're probably thinking. Most of you, almost all of you, have been in the Leadership Shelby County before, and ordinarily I get to spend time with you at the opening retreat and at Justice Day. And I imagine right now you're watching this video thinking, wow, he really put on the Corona 15. But I got to tell you, I actually lost weight during the virus. All my favorite restaurants closed. California Pizza Kitchen, Casino Superior, Macaroni Grill, all closed. So please understand that this extra weight that you're perceiving is actually because of the camera. Camera really does add 15. But I'm assured by the production staff that they can take it out in post. The leadership board approached me and asked me to do a talk in this series, and I really appreciate the board making this offer to us to be able to do this on a monthly basis. I've enjoyed the talks previously given by our county manager, Chad Scroggins, our probate judge, Allison Boyd. I'm honored to be in their company, and I appreciate the board making this opportunity available. And they asked me to speak about the innovations that we've brought to the court system during the pandemic. And I told them that I would be glad to do that and honored to do that, and I am, but I lied about what I'm going to talk about. I don't want to talk about innovations in the court system. What I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about today is lemonade. And that may sound strange to you, but I want you to reflect for just a moment about the thing that people my age refer to as an adage. Those of you who are millennials, y'all know them as memes now, which have replaced adages. But you've probably ever heard the phrase, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Well, have you ever had a bigger lemon than the coronavirus pandemic? I know in the court system, and I can just speak from that perspective, that industry, if you will, we've never been handed a bigger lemon than the virus. And what I wanted you to reflect on today with me is this, that when life hands you lemons, yes, it's a great attitude to make lemonade, but you know what? If life hands you lemons and you hadn't got any sugar, but you do have some water, then all you've got is lemon-flavored water. And if life hands you lemons and all you've got is sugar, then all you've got is lemon syrup. What it takes is not only the lemons that you're handed, but you've got to take water and sugar and put them together. So yes, I want to talk to you today about partnership. Because one of the things that we've seen in our court system is that we have had partners that we have historically relied on, that we've built relationships of trust with, and that we were able to count on during the pandemic. And we also discovered and created new partnerships. And I want to talk to you briefly about both of those. Now, when I talk about lemonade, the good things that come from the pandemic, from the lemon that was the coronavirus, I think at the top of the list is probably going to be efficiency. As in most other sectors, we have relied heavily on Zoom technology. I bet you all remember when the virus kind of first came into our lives. I know for me, in early March, I was in a jury trial. And in the court system, when you're involved in a jury trial, you really don't have an outside life. So for lawyers and for judges, we don't pay attention to tweets or Facebook posts. We don't watch TV. We don't read the paper or things like that. While we're in that trial is our life. And then when we emerge, we turn our phones back on and all our text messages come flooding in. And with me, that was on Wednesday, March the 11th. I finished, my jury returned a verdict Wednesday, March the 11th. I turned my phone messages back on and it just lit up like a pinball machine. And it's friends saying things to me like, oh my gosh, the NBA just canceled its season. Can you believe Tom Hanks has the coronavirus? My wife texted me, can you get some toilet paper and milk on the way home? And I understood the milk, but I didn't understand the toilet paper thing at all. Honey, what are you cooking for dinner tonight? But I was that naive about what was going on. And so Thursday, the 14th of March, came to work, learned a little bit more about what had transpired over the previous week, and really just started trying to absorb what is this going to look like? What does this even mean? But didn't do a lot of heavy planning. And I'll never forget, Friday night, March the 13th, 10 o'clock, I'm getting ready for bed, just happened to check my email before I nodded off to sleep. And there was an email from the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama that informed the judges of this state that moving forward that jury trials were going to be suspended in the state of Alabama. And in fact, all in-person hearings, with certain limited exceptions, were going to be suspended pending further order. And this was a shock to the system. This, for non-lawyers who may be watching this morning, the closest analogy that I can think of to being told that a court system has to operate without in-person hearings and without jury trials is like being told, all right, Alabama and Auburn, you're going to play the Iron Bowl, but you're not going to have end zones. It literally is the lifeblood of the court system, the jury trial. And so that was the sea change moment, if you will, for the justice system, and it kind of set into motion a lot of the things that we had to do to adapt to this new reality. And the first thing that I did on behalf of our court system was to reach out to our partners. The idea of the court system working in partnership with other agencies and organizations is not a novel one, especially not here in Shelby County. We're well accustomed to having to rely on our county commission, on our sheriff's office, district attorney's office, our county bar association. We realize that the more that we do together, the better we are together. And so that wasn't a new concept, but in the early days of the coronavirus, one of the things that became readily apparent is that if we didn't rely more heavily on those established relationships, if we didn't forge new ones, then we were really going to be in trouble. And I just want to give a couple of examples of that. We've always known that we could rely on the county commission to step in and fulfill roles that really aren't even their financial responsibility. You know, the court system is primarily a state-funded system. I'm a state employee, for example. The district attorney is a state employee. And the county has no obligation to help us with anything other than just providing us a place to have court, which is, of course, the Shelby County Courthouse. Well, the county commission has far exceeded that role. I will never forget that this was Chad's second or third week on the job, I think, and wow, you get a pandemic your first day on the job, and Chad did a wonderful job, and I have to say, taught me off the ledge a couple of times. But one of the first requests I made to him was, we have no IT department as far as the state court is concerned to help us with issues here at the courthouse, and so I had to self-teach myself Zoom, but it occurred to me, you can't really Zoom with yourself. You've got to be able to Zoom with other parties. And so within a week, I went back and looked at my day planner, and within a week of March 13th, on March the 20th, the county had already come over to the courthouse, had established a Zoom courtroom here in one of the office suites, and had also established a counterpart at the county jail. Within a matter of 14 days from the emergency declaration in the justice system, I was able to conduct hearings with inmates at the county jail with their attorney present, with a court reporter present, and without the sheriff having to transport those inmates back and forth from the county jail. The first such hearing that we had was on March the 30th, which was just a little bit more than 2 weeks after the Supreme Court had said, no more in-person hearings. What you do, you're going to need to do by phone call or by video conference. And I really appreciated the county's assistance in really setting that up on the fly, and something that we had never even experimented with before. We did not have in our local court system any experience with video conferencing, and so this was a new technology, and it's really borne a lot of fruit. What it has allowed us to do since the implementation of this video courtroom at the jail is we now actually have 3 such conference rooms, and so each of the judges here can schedule independently of one another with the jail, and the jail has done a fantastic job of provisioning the inmates and having them arrive in the conference room on time. They know how to adjust their audio settings. I never have to tell them, hey, you're muted, unmute. They know to do that kind of thing, and it's all because they've been dedicated to this new way of doing things. The lemonade of that is that it's a more efficient process. It's also safer for the citizens of Shelby County. Fewer inmate transports means there's less occurrence of contraband going into the jail. There is less incidents of escape. There are fewer incidents of violence between inmates. And particularly when the paradigm for our criminal dockets would be transporting 40 to 50 inmates at one time on a bus, and now we transport no inmates, it's been a tremendous, not only cost savings to the county, but also it's improved our efficiency, and it's made the hearings themselves a little bit more personal to the defendants. One of the benefits that we immediately recognized in terms of technology was that we needed to be able to reach our litigants in some way. And here again, the county stepped in and helped me design a web page that we could send to all of our drug court participants, our veterans court participants, and our mental health court participants, which was very simply a survey that they could fill out on their phone, answering basic questions about whether they had a phone that had an operating system that could run Zoom, whether the phone has a camera, whether the phone has a microphone, and also whether they're on a data plan or whether they have internet access. Phil Burns, in particular, was of great assistance in producing that video and that website. We sent that questionnaire out, and in less than a week, we had responses from 93% of our participants that said that they could participate in Zoom and actually would appreciate the opportunity to do that. And so once we had that information and they had provided us with their cell phone numbers, their email addresses and things like that, we very quickly spun up our first Zoom drug court experience or session, which was kind of a surreal moment because I literally sat on the bench in the courtroom and looked at the laptop and just watched all these windows pop up, which was all our participants. Now, the typical drug court experience involves participants coming up in front of the bench and talking with the judge about what's going on in their life, what are the challenges they face in their recovery, what do they think the tools are that they can lean on in sustaining recovery once they get to that point. But it's a very impersonal kind of conversation because when I'm the judge presiding over drug court, I'm wearing a robe, I'm up on the bench, I'm looking down into the well at this person who's having that talk with the judge in front of sometimes as many as 80 or 90 other people. What we immediately learned about Zoom, and this is part of the lemonade that we experienced in the drug court realm, is that now the participants are able to sit on their couch at home, talk to the judge, and the conversation's exactly the same, except this time the family cat wanders by. Or maybe the baby just woke up from a nap and mama leaves the sofa and brings the baby back and introduces that child to the drug court judge and the drug court team. We learn so much more about our participants by being able to meet them where they are instead of having them come to us. And this is lemonade, pure lemonade. And it was fantastic to see that just work its way out. Each and every week we learn new things about our participants that we wouldn't have known but for Zoom. One young man was still at work. He worked at an auto salvage yard, and he apologized for having to come to court while he was still at work. But he did tell us that while he had us on the phone, he wanted to show us this engine that he was repairing. And so he literally just turned, took his camera, opened the hood of the car, and gave us a demonstration of the type of work that he does there in that yard. And we were so impressed by that, being able to actually get out into the defendant's environment instead of having them come to our turf, as the case would be. And so that's been a blessing. The county, I could go on and on about their just their outstanding ability to help us. Both Judge Boyd and I relied on Chad to help us with signage for the courthouse. You know, we never actually closed the Shelby County Courthouse. We did close to the public, but the Constitution says that the court shall be open. And that's not permissive language, that's mandatory language. So although the court system never closed, the physical court facility did close to the public on occasion, and that was where it became all the more important to rely on the county and their assistance with the issues of technology. Now, I mentioned that being an established partner of the court system. Another one of our partners are the attorneys. We have a very good local bar that works well together, and very early on, we were just all in shock because being told that we can't have in-person hearings and being told that you can't have jury trials, and nobody knew how long that was going to last, required us to really get creative. And so I met with a number of attorneys and talked with them over the phone. We started a few Zoom bull sessions, for lack of a better term. I reached out to some other judges whose judgment I respect. And essentially in Shelby County, we devised collectively a set of rules and procedures and protocols and expectations for conducting court virtually by way of the Zoom video platform. I never thought when I was in law school that one day I would use the word cyberspace in an order that I wrote, but I did. I had to declare cyberspace to be an approved court facility for the conducting of court hearings in Shelby County. I also felt kind of self-conscious about directing the attorneys in this circuit to ignore one of the most basic principles that we learn in law school. You know, in law school, it is drilled into your brain that when you are in a court of law, you may never, as an attorney, turn your back on the judge or on the jury. And yet the pandemic has forced us into a situation that I'm going to show you where it is impossible to fulfill your role as an attorney during these coronavirus times without turning your back to at least the judge or the jury. To understand the challenges that we faced in the justice system in conducting jury trials during a pandemic, it's important to reflect on the way that courtrooms existed before the pandemic, because the pandemic didn't change the law, and we don't easily set aside traditions that have been with our country for going back hundreds of years, all the way back to England. And so I thought I would just kind of demonstrate to you the reason that courtrooms in America are laid out the way that they are. Now I'm standing in front of what's known as the gallery. The gallery is the public seating area of any courtroom in the United States. The Constitution guarantees that court shall be held in public. In other words, we don't have closed star chamber type proceedings. Any spectator at any time is able to walk into a courthouse, sit down, and watch a public jury trial, and it's a very important constitutional component of the way that a courtroom is laid out. But importantly, in America, we and our founding fathers felt that it was very important that our system be one of laws and not of men. They thought that it was very important that we separate the mob from the very orderly fashion of arriving at justice in a court of law. And so the rail of justice, or the bar as some would call it, is what physically separates any courtroom in the United States, the mob, from the actual law or from the participants in the trial itself. It is a visible symbol of the orderly fashion of arriving at justice in our court system, and it is separate and apart from the mob. So the first challenge that we face with our jury in the courtroom is, where do we seat them? I'm going to show you in just a moment the jury box. Right now, though, in the pandemic at least, this is the jury box. Now, you've all, if you've been through Leadership Shelby County, you've been in my courtroom, courtroom number 5. You know how large it is and the seating. Well, amazingly, in the entire gallery, in these 15 benches, you can only seat 11 jurors and still have them socially distanced from each other and from the trial participants. And I know what you're saying, aren't there 12 people in a jury? And the answer is, yes, there are. And so what we've had to do in Shelby County is seat 11 jurors in the gallery and seat 2 of the jurors in the very back row of the jury box, which I'll show you now. So this is the traditional jury box, probably looks familiar to you, and in times of the pandemic, it seats only 2 jurors in order to accommodate social distancing, one in the back corner seat and then one on this far seat. But of course, in normal times, pre-pandemic, we would have our entire jury of 13 individuals, 12 jurors plus 1 alternate. They would be seated here in the jury box together. As you can see, no social distancing in that scenario. So we had to turn to the only other option we had, which is the gallery of the courtroom. Now, this in itself presented a unique problem. We have room for 11 jurors to sit in the gallery, 2 to sit in the jury box. What about the public right to access a jury trial? The Constitution and its guarantee of public jury trials require that any citizen be able to observe or monitor a courtroom proceeding. And so that problem was solved with technology. I don't know if you can see it or not, but we've got cameras set up on the back wall, on the bench, facing the witness stand. And so any proceeding that takes place in one of the courtrooms here at the courthouse is actually live streamed by Zoom to one of the other non-used courtrooms during the trial, so that the family members of the victim, the defendant, and any members of the public or the media they can still watch the trial, but the courtroom itself is reserved solely for the court participants and for our jury of 13 people seated in the gallery and the jury box. Okay, so now we have 2 jurors seated in the traditional jury box. We have 11 jurors seated in what's formerly known as the gallery, and you can see the challenge presented to the attorneys, which is that in order to face the members of the jury, they have to be seated in a manner that is facing the jury, but with their back turned toward the judge who is seated on the bench. And to understand why this is a tradition that's not so easily set aside, you have to appreciate the significance of architecture in the courtrooms of this country. In every courtroom in America, the bench is the highest point of elevation in the courtroom. And the reason for that elevation is to symbolize the importance of the law in our system of justice. The judge, the focus is not so much on the judge himself or herself, it's on the judge as the representative of the law, and that is why the eye is drawn to that highest point. And you can see why that tradition of lawyers never turning their back on the judge, i.e. never turning their back on the law, is not a tradition that's easily set aside, but it's been one that's been necessary during the pandemic. So as you can see, we've gone from a very organized and thoughtful architecture for the courtroom and had to turn it upside down. But getting 13 people in the courtroom to try a case is actually not the greatest challenge that we faced. You know, not only did the onset of the pandemic kind of highlight and reinforce the need to rely on partners in our justice system, but it really emphasized the need to reach out and develop new relationships and to forge new partnerships. And I have Leadership Shelby County to thank for that. If you go back to March 13th and the suspension by the Supreme Court of all jury trials, that means there aren't any jury trials moving forward. And in-person hearings suspended by operation of that order by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then, in a couple of weeks after that, started recognizing that the data that was coming in about infection rates and death rates and hospitalization rates, that it was highly localized. So you heard a lot about Jefferson County, Mobile, Marshall County, Shelby County was in that conversation also. And what the Supreme Court decided to do, and I thought it was extraordinary, was they put the decision on when to reinstate in-person hearings and jury trials in the hands of the presiding judges. Each judicial circuit, essentially each county, has its own presiding judge, and the Supreme Court says, we want that decision to be made on a local level. It's up to the presiding judge to decide. And that was a lot of pressure for me, and I had to seek a lot of input on when the appropriate time to resume in-person hearings, what the appropriate way to resume in-person hearings was. Most importantly, and this was the largest challenge, was how and when to resume jury trials. The Supreme Court said that they cannot be resumed any earlier than September 14th. I thought it was very important for our jurisdiction, both symbolically and practically, that we start on September 14th. And so I'm pleased to say today that we were among one of only a few counties that actually pressed forward and conducted a jury trial on September 14th, which was the earliest day that the Supreme Court allowed. And we could not have done it without Leadership Shelby County, and let me explain that. Some of you have served on jury duty before. All of you have probably been in courtroom number 5, which is the courtroom we use for Justice Day. And when you were here at the Shelby County Courthouse for Justice Day, you probably sat in the gallery of 3 sections of 5 rows apiece, seats about 100 people. If you can imagine on a typical Monday that we impanel our juries to begin service here at the courthouse, we'll have about 115 to 120 people that arrive for jury service. Obviously, with social distancing protocols, there was going to be no way for us to impanel juries in order to hear cases at the courthouse. And so the challenge was, how do we pull that off? So at the state level, the state Supreme Court authorized an online jury summons that is sent to potential jurors who were selected randomly. It allows those jurors to electronically answer a series of qualifying questions and then answer questions about their level of concern about the virus, and then those results are submitted to me as the presiding judge. I have taken the position that anyone who expresses serious reservations about the virus or who is a caregiver to somebody that's in a risk factor, they're excused upon request. And that's the first time in history that I can remember that we've allowed citizens essentially to beg off jury duty. But the fact is that we have had willing people come in and render service as jurors. And none of that would have been possible if it hadn't been for Leadership Shelby County. You know, when I started thinking about how can we pull off getting 115, 120 people in the same room at a time, there really aren't a whole lot of places that you can do that. Maybe the football stadium, maybe a church, but then we'll have arguments about separation of church and state. What about the Pelham Civic Complex? And then it finally occurred to me that, you know, I drive right by one of the most fantastic facilities that's ever been constructed in this area, and that is the Shelby County Arts Council building at Old Mill Square. And I had seen the project while it was under construction, and I had wondered about what's going to be housed there, and I had wondered about how it was funded, and never really sought the answers to those kind of questions, and honestly just didn't pay it much attention until all of a sudden I realized that may be the answer to our challenge. And so I Googled Shelby County Arts Council, and I saw that the executive director of the Arts Council was a fellow named Bruce Andrews, who I just happened to have remembered hazing when he was in the leadership of Shelby County class of 2019. I won't tell you what his challenge was during our icebreaker exercise, but suffice it to say, I felt comfortable that I could call Bruce Andrews on the phone. And as I read further on the Arts Council website, I noticed that the Arts Council building itself is actually a collaborative venture between the Arts Council and the City of Columbiana. The City of Columbiana, I was interested to learn, was responsible for the maintenance of the Grand Hall at the Arts Council building, which is a 10,000 square foot ballroom. So just to be clear, I've just been handed the biggest challenge of my professional career, and that is manage a court system and jury trials in the midst of a global pandemic. And I happen to have right across the street from the courthouse where I preside a 10,000 square foot ballroom. So I very quickly got Mayor Stancil Hanley, who was one of my classmates in the class of 2008. In fact, he was our class president. And I got Bruce Andrews, class of 2019 of Leadership Shelby County, on the phone. And I asked them this. I said simply, here's the challenge that we have. We have to get a large group of people together, but they have to be socially distanced. Ideally, it would be at least 10 feet between each other. I've done the math on the Arts Council building, particularly the Grand Hall, and I think that could work. We want to be gracious guests. I know that you'll be hospitable hosts, but what I would hope that we could do moving forward is, as long as we have to live with the circumstances of the pandemic and social distancing, I hope that we'll be able to have a productive partnership, and that maybe we can bring, in the form of jurors, people randomly selected from throughout the county to come to Columbiana, many of whom have never been here before, bring them into this fantastic facility, yes, to strike a jury, but also so that they can be exposed to the wonderful facility and the personnel that operate that facility, and maybe, just maybe, they will come back. So Bruce and Stancil both said, sounds like a win-win to us. We worked out the details, and together, working in that partnership, the law and the arts community and city government, whoever thought that there could be such a combination, but it allowed us to be the first jurisdiction in the state to move forward with jury trials. I'm proud of that initiative. That initiative is ongoing. We're trying jury trials now every month, and I am happy to say that it wouldn't have happened if not for the connections that you make in Leadership Shelby County. And so I think, you know, in the years to come, when I reflect back on this critical time in our nation, and I think about the challenges that have been presented, I'm going to be proud of the lemonade that we've made with our established partners, but I'm going to be really proud of the Arnold Palmer that we made with the sweet tea that brought to us by the City Council of Columbiana, and the sugar that Bruce Andrews provided on behalf of the Arts Council. That Arnold Palmer, if you will, is the thing of which we'll be most proud, and I think which will be our legacy moving forward of how to surmount a challenge in the court system.